Bitcoiners, welcome back to another conversation with Bitcoin Magazine. This week, I'm sitting with Aydin Kilic, the CEO and president of Hive Blockchain. We are going to dive into a bunch of stuff around what does it take to be successful as a miner, especially when things get rough and tough in the Bitcoin mining industry. Let's get right into it. Aydin, welcome to the show and excited to chat about Hive and everything that's happening with Bitcoin mining.
Thank you, CK. It's great to be back. It's always a pleasure to talk to you guys. And hello to all the Bitcoiners out there. Bitcoin is it. Digital property, baby.
Yeah, well, hey, in a world where banks are failing and Bitcoin mining hash rate is screaming up higher, I think it is really important to sit down with an expert in the field like yourself. So before we get into all of these different questions about Hive and about the current market dynamics, I would love to learn a little bit more about yourself and how you really helped build Hive and make it what it is today.
Oh, yeah, right. That's a great starting point. So our chairman is Frank Holmes, and I met Frank on a panel back in January 2018. Over 5 years ago. At the time, I was a CEO of a company I had founded and took public. It was called Fortress Blockchain originally. It's listed on the TSXV. It's called Cathedra Bitcoin now. It's run by AJ and Drew. And in 2021, I was an opportunity to join Hive as president and chief operating officer came up, and I was inspired to found Fortress by Hive, right? Like Hive was the first public crypto miner ever. And Frank, we developed a friendship, and he's been a mentor of mine. So it was an amazing opportunity, which I was very grateful for. And so since summer of 2021, I've been working with the Hive team, and Hive had grown by M&A. Under Frank's stewardship, he acquired the CryptoLogic asset in Quebec, 30 megawatts, and then the GP1 asset in New Brunswick. And so as we've grown through M&A, we've integrated team members, and I would say we've got like a really high performance culture at Hive, and we attract like the best and the brightest guys. We're super analytical. That's how we maintain our peak uptime in the sector. And so it's a testament, I think, to just a great team ethic that we've got. We're in 7 time zones around the world. We huddle every day at 7 a.m. my time, which is evening for the guys in Europe. And we try to embrace agility mindset, because no 2 days are the same in crypto mining, right? Like there's no set it and forget it solution. So it's all about being adaptive and resilient. And it's I love Bitcoin, right? So you got to love what you do.
No, absolutely. And I actually did not know that you were the founder of Fortress. I'm personal friends with Drew and AJ, and it's really interesting to see them make the moves that they're making in a bear market and try to position that company for success with their unique strategy. And, looking at Hive, Hive is probably one of the most unique Bitcoin and crypto miners out there. I know that, it's the first publicly held company that is mining Bitcoin, but also, one of the most unique in terms of strategy, in terms of ability to make good decisions and be profitable even in the hardest of times, like right now when prices are down and competitiveness is extremely high, and maybe even public sentiment is neutral or negative or at least aggressive. I'm kind of curious, when you're looking out at the landscape and you're looking at all the mistakes that have been made with counterparts in the field who may have gotten a little bit over their skis with either machine purchases or with expansion or partnerships. How has Hive stayed so competitive and been able to maintain profitability even in the hardest, most competitive industry at the most difficult time?
Yeah, so I think a measure of a crypto miner is really made in a bear market. It's all about your revenue per megawatt hour. And so as the industry evolves, the landscape gets more complex to analyze, because you have machines of all different efficiencies. An S9 is 90 joules a terahash, an S19 is 30 joules a terahash, and an XP is 22 joules a terahash, right? But then the entry point to purchase any one of these machines varies wildly, of course, as markets fluctuate up and down. And where capital markets are sort of, there's this dichotomy to crypto is, you can raise money in a bull market, but that's the worst time to expand because, spot price for new ASICs will be $100 a terahash, which is never a good choice to act on, to purchase at that price. And the reason why I say that is you can actually map Bitcoin mining economics. You can do like planar math and kind of look at the interstitial relationships between your primary variables. So you've got obviously Bitcoin price, difficulty, machine efficiency, your electrical operating costs, right? And whether you're trying to solve for ROI or break-even price. And the primary lever, and some of those things you can control and some you can't control. So you can't control difficulty, you can't control Bitcoin price. You can control the dollar per terahash price you invest in. You obviously can control the machine efficiency because that's your choice. And in site selection, your dollar per kilowatt hour operating cost, right? And so for the three variables that you control, when you map it out, when you graph it, the steepest gradient is your dollar per terahash. So you make your bed right from the get-go when you're buying your ASICs. And so what you need to understand is how, obviously hash rate economics are very time variant, right? And so like I don't do run rate analysis. That's like lazy. You have to model things on a time variant basis and see the sensitivity analysis and understand what your base operating cost is. And then know that your profit is that little fluctuation part on top. And then map what your ROI will be based on the types of machines. And so it gets complex because you've got multivariate equations and shifting dynamics. And so it is very important to know what machine to buy. Like, if there's a 38 joule per terahash machine, I'm making up an example, for $10 a terahash, or a 30 joule per terahash machine for $15 a terahash, which one's better? And, you also want to look at where hash rate economics are today, compression over time, because obviously hash rate's commodified. 5 years ago, an S9 did 13 terahash. That was the Model T4 that was being, rolled off the production line by Bitmain. Now the S19 is the new Model T4 that has 100 terahash. So you're going to just have more hash rate produced. And when you look at your hash price, which the guys at Luxor do a phenomenal job on their analytics, their hash rate index is second to none. And you can study all of these things. You kind of need to understand your revenue floors so that you're pre-planning. And by the way, you've got to have treasury management, because even if you buy all the right machines at the best price, if you don't have any cash left in the till, if things go really south, then you can end up in a unfortunate situation, which we've seen with some of our industry peers. But I think that's mostly exacerbated by people that take on debt to buy ASICs, which we don't do. I mean, we looked at, we talked to half a dozen different finance companies. Everyone's super friendly, super well-spoken, super educated, but they're out to get you, right? Like, it's a hustle. So you can't just go, like, you go to these conferences, you meet, everybody gives their card, like, hey, yeah, you want to buy more ASICs? We'll lend you money. And then you're like, okay, you look at the contract and you're like, all right, well, I mean, this will bleed us. So thanks, but no thanks. And so, sometimes the success in crypto mining isn't measured by the choices that you make, or the actions that you take. It's even by the things that you hold back on that can protect you. The other thing that we haven't done is we've not encumbered our balance sheet. We didn't borrow against our crypto balance sheet, which is tempting because, it's like, hey, all the upside of your Bitcoin hodl, but you can get cash now. But obviously, at 12 or 18% interest, that can crush companies, which we've seen. Like, the bigger they are, the harder they fall. People have this dream about scale. It's not economies of scale in crypto mining. It's economies of efficiency. If you boil down, if your all-in OPEX is 5.5 cents or 6 cents a kilowatt hour, but you've got older generation machines, and in December of 2022, we saw 50 joule per terahash machines cut down to about 5 cents a kilowatt hour. Now, look, we've got much newer machines, but I'm giving you an illustrative example of real world hash rate economics. 50 joule per terahash machines doing 5 cents a kilowatt hour, And if your OPEX is 6 cents, it doesn't matter if you're like 100 megawatts, your unit economics are at a loss
Yep.
and you'll bleed to death, right? So people just think it's about scale. And then as a public company, I'm just talking about gross mining margin. Then you got to layer on all this G&A. So now you're a public company, you got lawyers, you got IR, you got your executive team. And on top of that, if you've got debt because you encumbered your balance sheet or you finance your ASICs, things get super dicey. And we've obviously seen what that spells for some companies, right? And everyone has good intentions. I appreciate everyone participating in the ecosystem because we're all trying to secure the blockchain. We're all trying to contribute to the Bitcoin ecosystem in one way, shape, or form. But I think when there's too many financial machinations on top, that's where things kind of get fuzzy. So, in a way, we have a purist approach. Like, think about the Bitcoin white paper and bring it back to fundamentals when you think about the core of the business.
One of my favorite articles in Bitcoin is Parker Lewis's Bitcoin is the Great Definancialization. And the whole idea is like Bitcoin is kind of like this finance 2.0 that's built on a much more straightforward, verifiable, and clean foundation. Whereas if you look at, financialization where it is today, it's leverage on leverage on leverage and derivative on derivative on derivative. So it always was a little bit of a like kind of a yellow flag or a red herring to see so many of the Bitcoin miners and crypto miners kind of get caught up in that leverage. There's kind of an axiom in Bitcoin: stay humble and stack sats. And it's hey, you could lever up and get more Bitcoin, but if you just stick to acquiring what you can afford and staying humble and solvent, that potentially that gets you in the best place. And it sounds like Hive's mining and leverage philosophy really is a lot more aligned with that kind of axiom of staying humble, keeping, not getting above your skis and trying to make good, value-based decisions.
Yeah, 100%. And like, I think that's very eloquently put. And the essence of that narrative is timeless, right? In Bitcoin. I mean, our CTO, Bill Gray, he's been mining since 2011. And I think anybody that's been in the game long enough, they've lived that. Like you just know that's a truth, right? And that's the thing. Like, so it's a definancialization. But yeah, in the last bull run in 2021, there was like all these Wall Street guys that try to financialize it. So yeah, and like when you look at all these like staking tokens in DeFi, it's like, yeah, it's just like leverage on leverage on leverage. It's just like gambling. But as Bitcoin miners, it's an infrastructure business. We're in the energy business. Whether you like it or not, you've got to acknowledge that you're in the energy business when you're a bulge bracket miner. And like, just on that note, we participate in grid balancing and demand response initiatives in jurisdictions where that's possible. And people talk about it, like everybody talks about it. But the thing is, Hive is we've been doing demand response in Sweden for years, right? And I remember meeting the national energy provider, and I flew into Stockholm. It was a year and a half ago, and they told us that Hive blockchain is the largest demand response company client of theirs in the whole country. And so the thing is there's all these ideals that Bitcoin miners espouse. There are a few of us that are actually doing it. We're doing heat recapture in Quebec. We heat our neighbor, which is our industrial neighbor. It's like a 200,000 square foot warehouse. They manufacture swimming pools. It's like rural Montreal. So it's like super cold in the winter. So we heat them. So it's about, I think, the time where there's been a lot of ideas that have been talked about in the Bitcoin community. And now like a few companies are actually doing it. So I think it's good to emphasize the fact that people are really kind of taking it to the next level and, helping, whether it's, local governments, provincial or statewide governments, realize that there are some miners that really try to be mindful citizens of the communities, right? We donate to the hockey team in Sweden. Named after us. Yeah, seriously, like all the kids under 16 can go watch the games for free. And it's about getting them excited, right? Because like the Bowdoin hockey team, they've actually had 2 Stanley Cup players, come from. So it's not like some bush league team. Like they're like it's northern Sweden. So I think there's this like misperception that like Bitcoin miners
Yep,
just come in and gobble up power. It's like no, man. Like we go to why like have to like not to you because I'm sure you have, but I mean to the unengaged, common person that doesn't really know about Bitcoin mining. If you go visit a Bitcoin mine, it's in the middle of nowhere because we go where the power to close to the generation sources. And guess what? It's expensive to either store power or transmit it. So we're not like setting up in downtown Toronto causing brownouts because the power is super expensive there. We're going close to generation sources in the middle of nowhere, close to substations, right? And
totally.
we are like the utility companies are selling us power like we're their clients. We're helping their income and their balance sheet. Like they want us. It's not like we're storming in there and we're like, guess what? We're here to buy your electrons. We're like, oh, okay, boys, sorry. Here, they're over here. It's like we sign contracts with them. They invest in infrastructure. It's a very symbiotic relationship.
Totally. For the people who are paying attention, Aydin, and you know this better than anyone else, you can't be pro energy and you can't be pro efficiency and you can't be pro abundance without embracing Bitcoin mining because it's such a massive efficiency gain. And it seems like the best kept secret of Bitcoin is, the potential that it has to help and fix energy grids across the planet. We're living through lots of different crises right now in the developing world and the first world alike, and one of those is abundant and cheap power. So I definitely want to jump into your experience building out and operating successful Bitcoin mines in Europe, which is one of the places where the narrative has been very strong around their energy crisis. But I would want to just like point out something that you said maybe like 5 minutes ago, which is that Bitcoin mining is not economies of scale, but rather it's economies of efficiency. And that too is something that is completely not talked about enough in terms of mining. The narrative right now is mining is going to take up massive scale and it's going to be massively inefficient and gobble up all this energy when really that can be further from the truth. Whereas mining is actually the most efficient and it is the most practical and the most positive in terms of helping the grid, just based on the fact that it can set up anywhere and it can turn off at any time. Those two features, it makes Bitcoin mining into such a powerful lever to build into grids across the planet. So yeah, I know I said a bunch there. Want to give you a chance to react, and then maybe we can jump over to talk about a little bit more about mining in Europe.
Yeah, so I think just broadly talking about um, setting up the infrastructure and the awareness around energy consumption. I mean, it's been said before. I'll always say it. Bitcoin is a decentralized energy-backed currency, which is a beautiful thing. It's truly decentralized, right? You've got Bitcoin mines set up all over the world, and it is backed by energy, which is a good thing. So it's not just this like ephemeral fluff coin that you can just mint through some code, right? It's the transactions are verified, it's immutable. All these fundamental principles that we were explaining to the street back in 2017 when companies like Hive were going public, and all the other companies that were founded and went public in that era. This was what we were explaining to people, and Bitcoin has still emerged, and it's now in its 12th year. Um,
14th
well,
year.
sorry, no,
14th
14th.
year.
Geez, whoa.
2009.
Time flies, baby. And so it's like these time tested principles stand true. And so I feel like when like the Warren Buffetts and Charlie Mungers of the world realize like, and they've obviously got energy interests, um, and they go, wait a second, Bitcoin's an energy backed asset. Hold on, we've got energy assets. There'll be like an inflection point, and I think people will embrace it. So that's one piece, and I think the other piece too that's definitely worth acknowledging in the wake of all of the scandal with FTX and all these sorts of exchange-driven frauds is that an exchange business, like there was an exchange in Vancouver, Einstein, that went under, a bunch of money disappeared, Quadriga.
That was a huge scandal.
Huge scandal. And you know what, dude? It's an exchange. It's some guys that got all your coins. It's totally centralized. They could pack up and disappear, right? Remember when FTX got hacked just before like
Oh
shit hit the
man.
fan? Like how I can't, me and Frank can't go take a pickup truck and go load the substation and 33,000 ASICs in the back of a pickup truck and drive to Venezuela and like run off with our Bitcoin mine. It does it no, it's in Quebec, it's in New Brunswick. Like it's expansive. It's like massive amounts of infrastructure and physical real assets. So it's a real operating business. And so for that, and we're publicly traded, so we're audited every single year, you know. So it's very robust and transparent as a business in that regard. And so again, like you know, you don't hear about it, like Bitcoin's a peer-to-peer network. Don't get me wrong, we need exchanges. We work with a couple trust exchanges. We need an on-ramp to fiat as a public company to pay bills, et cetera, et cetera. So there's definitely a place for like good exchanges out there. But I would say generally, you know, mining is part of the original white paper, and the business model I think is very sound. It's very immune to fraud, right? Especially as a publicly traded crypto miner. So I think that you know, for people that look for exposure to Bitcoin as an asset class, you know, crypto mining stocks, they're actually more volatile, right? So for people that like to play the volatility, but then you've also got management teams and methodologies that you can study, and you can be like, you know what, this mindset resonates with me. These decisions that they've made, I think, speak to me. And so that's where I think mining as an asset class is, you know, it's an interesting one. But Europe, you wanted to hear about Europe. I mean,
Yeah. Well, again, like here's the backdrop is, the oldest German manufacturing companies that have been through, both wars are closing down. Europe, went through their big winter scare, and, I guess they get a reset of the clock now that we're entering into the spring and summer. But, it's difficult to build and operate, high electricity industrial projects in Europe today. Yet, Hive has been successful. So, can you just talk about those dynamics and where you're finding opportunity?
well, we've been operating in Sweden, Iceland for quite a few years now, and I think part of it is having an established track record and setting up shop and being a good steward in those jurisdictions. You know, we've since expanded in both jurisdictions. We actually have our primary data center in Boden. We have a smaller one as well in another small town in rural Sweden. And again, like making the investments in the local community. We also signed an LOI to partner with Actier, which is a NASDAQ listed greenhouse builder, because we want to build a greenhouse right next to our data center in Boden and do heat recapture, which of course would be used to grow vegetables. Specifically, it's I think a 90,000 square foot warehouse, which can produce annually 800 tons of tomatoes and cucumbers. And so when you think about the impact of that, now you're talking like carbon negative, because now people in northern Sweden can get produce without having to incur a carbon footprint flying those kind of vegetables from like Spain or Italy during the winter, right? So I think it's when you make these kind of strides, and you know, by the way, we're also doing some cloud computing, or sorry, I should say, high performance computing with our GPU fleet, and you show kind of like diversity and resilience. I think that's looked favorably upon in the European countries. But yeah, I mean, it's again, it's just being a good corporate citizen of wherever you're doing business. I think is the best long term key to success, because you know, you're always contending with this perception of like, oh well, you know, you don't have a lot of jobs. No, we do have jobs, and they're great jobs. Like we've had zero turnover in New Brunswick, for example. Frankly, any of our data centers globally, right? Like people love working there. One of the kids in our New Brunswick, one of the younger technicians, great guy. He put himself through community college. He was mining Ethereum on a laptop, you know. So when he got to work in one of Canada's largest Bitcoin mines, it was a dream come true. I met him in person. I go out there from time to time. We had our Hive Buzz miner, which is powered by the Intel ASIC, the block scale ASIC. we had the first prototype in the world in New Brunswick, and like these kids were just over the moon. They couldn't believe that they were getting to evaluate it. So that's kind of like another thing I think is when the people you employ love working there, and you've just got a good rep in your community. That's very important.
So let's pivot over to talking about the United States. We've seen the U.S. after the Great Chinese Mining Ban in 2021. We've seen the U.S. really being kind of like the primary beneficiary in terms of jurisdiction hosting hash rate. Where do you kind of see the future of hash rate being built out? Obviously, Hive has data centers both in North America as well as in Europe, and even in Iceland, like you mentioned. I guess what's next in terms of like the great build out of the Bitcoin network?
I think I really hope that the U.S. becomes a safe harbor for crypto mining. I think that it might look something like the cannabis sector, whereby some states have strong support for it and other states not so much. And so you'll have these states that are very and obviously Texas. I mean, Florida isn't a mining state, but they're obviously pro Bitcoin, and numerous other states of the Midwest. So I think that's kind of the direction it's going. I like that, Gensler, Gary Gensler, the SEC boss, said everything but Bitcoin's a security, and so if Bitcoin's treated as a commodity, that's good. So, but then Biden comes out with this tax nonsense, the 30% tax, and I was actually in Houston at the Empower conference, and there was basically all the industry guys were there, and the sentiment that week was, well, this is not going to pass. There's no way the 30% tax will get traction. It's just he's just pandering to the populace, the kind of environmentalists, and it'll probably land at
The ill-informed environmentalists,
exactly,
because
yeah, the
like we said
ill-informed
earlier,
environment.
you can't actually be pro environment, pro efficiency without embracing Bitcoin mining. But
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. I just
No, 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 no.
that point I think is so important.
That's a great compliment. And so I think that I mean, like, look, he's just trying to rally populist favor, and it's easy to sort of lob these like lazy generalizations and ill-informed, and if you kind of pare it down, I think that was actually the tax is supposed to apply to maybe emitting sources of energy, and if you're non-carbon emitting, then you'll get like a pass. So I think that there's going to be a focus on obviously non-carbon emitting um, sources of power, hopefully throughout the US, that are embraced. And I think that as people realize, like, there's so much technology in the Bitcoin mining sector, whether it's new ASICs, that are being developed. And I mean, Michael Saylor and the entire Bitcoin Mining Council, we participate on those calls. They do a phenomenal job of exemplifying how the efficiency curve and increase just over the last 5 years of ASIC technology has grown unlike any other industry, right? So it's a highly efficiency driven business. There's so many cool things happening at the code level. I mean, we do our own custom firmware at Hive, and we like to treat ASICs through a dynamic range. We never do a set it and forget it mentality. That's one cool thing about the buzz miners that we've developed using the Intel chip, is that they've got dynamic ranges of operation, so we could run them for high hash rate, we can run them for high efficiency. You can kind of do that with third party stuff, like, but if you do it with Bitmain gear, then you're kind of out of warranty. MicroBT is a little bit more malleable, but of course, anyways, it's kind of being able to optimize your ASIC rigs using software, and then of course there's a whole world of immersion, which is exciting. So I think that when people realize how much of a technology business it really is, and that there's so many like, I've met so many brilliant people in ever since joining this industry. I think if the broader masses realize that this is something that really creates jobs, it spurs innovation, then they would likely welcome it with big open arms in the US. And and that now there's cool stuff like with ordinals. I mean, maybe that's a touchy subject for some Bitcoiners, but I don't know how you feel about that. But that's kind of another, code based improvement.
Yeah, I mean, hey, the way I see it is anything that works within the consensus rules, I'm open-minded to, honestly. So I know it is a sticky topic. We will be having some of the discourse around ordinals at the Bitcoin conference. Would love to pick your brain, Aydin, on what you're seeing there. I know miners are loving the fee bump, that's for sure.
Hmm.
So yeah, I'd be curious what you think of that dynamic. And I also, before we close out the interview as well, I want to talk to you about leveraging AI to maximize the profitability of your GPU fleet, especially in a post merge world, and then having that augment your Bitcoin stack. So yeah, I guess why don't we use the last 10 minutes here to jump into what you're seeing into kind of like the future of Bitcoin mining, both with the mining dynamics around ordinals, inscription, and that craze. Now that we're several months into it, and maybe we can talk about how Hive is leveraging AI as well.
Yeah. So as far as ordinals and inscriptions, I mean, it's the product of upgrades to Bitcoin Core, of course, with Taproot and Segwit, and I think it's really neat where when I was in high school, the internet was like this novel thing, right? And back then they had like BBS bulletin boards, like text-based games you could dial in, um, and obviously online gaming has evolved so much, like just light years beyond what it used to be, and so Bitcoin is still in its infancy, and so I think this marks the first sort of like really interest. I mean, don't get me wrong, this Bitcoin in itself is fascinating from its core, but having this inscription technology, sure, maybe it's starting with like JPEGs, but who knows what other things this will lead to in 3 or 5 years time. So I mean, look, I have an engineering degree. I specialize in electromagnetics, so I embrace technology. I think even cell phones, right? I mean, you never used to be able to have streaming video on cell phones, and then with the advent of social media, it started impacting day-to-day life for people in terms of convenience and so on and so forth. So I think that having this backbone of technology, when people get really creative, when they realize what's possible, that's when things get like super interesting and super exciting. So I'm very curious and optimistic, and yeah, of course, as a miner, I love the fee bump. And then on the GPU side of things, I think one thing that was always we didn't get enough credit for being one of the largest Ethereum miners in the world. Obviously, Ethereum mining is complex and intricate, but it was a very high margin business for us. And we had this large bank of NVIDIA data center grade GPUs, A40s, A4000s, A5000s, and A6000s. And so when the merge came, everybody was like, oh no, Chicken Little, the sky's falling, Hive's going to be dead, and oh no. And what happened was we immediately pivoted all of the GPUs to start mining altcoins. And in the wake of the merge, there's obviously this mass displacement of GPU based hash rate. And people are like, oh, well, it's all going to go into ETH Classic and, margins are going to thin out. I'm like, yeah, but they're not going to go to zero. Like there's always asymptotes, right? In crypto mining, like you're just going to get to a level where your hash price is so low that not everybody can continue to mine. And so eventually the difficulty will fall and only the people with the cheapest power or the most efficient machines can continue. Well, we had data center grade GPUs and we had very, very attractive power prices in Sweden. So guess what? We were able to continue mining through the merge thereon. Now, an interesting statistic is that in the wake of the merge, so like October 2022, our GPUs were doing about 75% of the revenue of ASICs on a dollar per megawatt hour basis, which I think is pretty cool. Now, prior to the merge, when we were mining ETH, I mean, they were doing like 35 cents a kilowatt hour when maybe ASICs were doing, 10 cents a kilowatt hour. Post merge, it was maybe closer to 6 or 7 cents a kilowatt hour when ASICs were doing maybe, 9 or 10 cents a kilowatt hour. But now it's flipped. So our GPUs are almost doing 10 cents a kilowatt hour, where ASICs are maybe 8 or 9 cents a kilowatt hour. So the GPUs are actually doing about 20% more revenue per kilowatt hour than the ASICs, which is I think remarkable. And then of course, as I alluded to, and so we have a this is not, we're not just mining ETH Classic. We're not like, we've got a unique switching algorithm. So we're mining different coins to determine what has the most profitable hash rate economics, and then it gets converted to Bitcoin. So we don't take any custody of any altcoins. We only get custody of Bitcoins through the GPUs. And I think I mentioned before, but it warrants being mentioned again, is that we have a pilot project of HPC with our GPUs, and our 80 kilowatt pilot project is doing $1.3 million a year of run rate revenue. And it works out, it's about 25 times as profitable. So it's like $2.50 a kilowatt hour is what we're earning from the HPC GPUs. $2.50 a kilowatt hour, whereas like say ASICs are 10 cents a kilowatt hour right now. So it's pretty cool. So we're focusing on expanding that right now. So it's a good supplementary aspect to the core mining business. But again, owning, operating our data centers and being mindful of our consumption of energy, and how we could have advanced compute just to further technological initiatives is all in a day's work for us.
Awesome. Well, Aydin, I really appreciate you coming onto the show and breaking down on an expert level, but also on a level that maybe some of the Bitcoin enthusiasts that are paying attention to the show can understand the nuances of how to operate a highly efficient and effective mining business, which is absolutely no cakewalk. Just to kind of close it out, now that we're kind of at the end of both of our time, if you had kind of one ending message or closing out message, both for the audience about Bitcoin mining as well as about Hive, what would that be?
Well, I think that we've actually got a really active Twitter and YouTube channel, and we try to put out engaging content that's good for people of all levels of expertise. And if you want to get more technical or advanced insights, when we do our quarterly earnings report, Frank, our executive chairman, myself, and Darcy, our CFO, we'll do like a long form, 45-minute presentation, and Frank will cover amazing insights into the macroeconomics. I mean, Frank's a titan of capital markets, right? Like, he's invested and taken so many companies public. So you'll just learn so much about, like, I'm always learning from Frank on a daily basis, right? Like, he's like one of the biggest guys in the gold game, right? Obviously, he's made huge waves in the crypto sector as well. But always listening to Frank's macroeconomic outlook is just such a great educational tool. And then I always like to dive into the nitty gritty. So look for our earnings call presentations. You can find them on our YouTube channel, Twitter. And if you're at any of the big conferences, Bitcoin Miami, baby, come say hi. We have really cool, I wish I had a Hive hat here, but we give out hats. It's got the gold B on it. And, we appreciate every single shareholder out there, or anyone that's just interested in learning about Bitcoin mining. Come say hi to anyone. Usually we're rocking a Hive shirt at the conference. Look forward to seeing you guys in Miami this year.
All right, awesome. Well, I can't wait. I think this is going to be aired in about a week or so. So less than 50 days to go until the conference, May 18th to the 20th. And I have to really encourage everyone, go talk to the folks at Hive. They definitely push forward their own direction when it comes to Bitcoin mining. And again, one of the most innovative and just creative companies in the Bitcoin mining space, and it's awesome to see them succeed in these tough times. And again, Aydin, I'm excited for the next time you come back on the show to share your knowledge about Bitcoin mining.
Thank you, CK. It's always a pleasure, man. You're one of the best interviewers in the game, hands down.
Thank you very much. All right, y'all. Make sure to like and subscribe. Make sure to check out Hive, and make sure to get your ticket to the Bitcoin conference. That is all from me. Peace.